Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Phoenix Reynolds stood at the edge of his property, overlooking the sprawling estate he'd built from nothing. At 52, he'd transformed from a scrappy contractor taking whatever jobs he could get to the owner of Reynolds Construction, one of the most successful development companies in the Northeast. The calluses on his hands had softened over the years, but the resolve in his eyes remained steel-hard. His phone buzzed in his pocket, another message from his sister, Beverly. He ignored it. She'd been trying to talk to him for weeks about Marilyn, his wife of 28 years. Phoenix wasn't stupid. He'd noticed the changes, the late nights, the new wardrobe, the sudden business trips. After their daughter Skylar announced her engagement 6 months ago, Marilyn had become increasingly distant, constantly coordinating with the Ainsley family, particularly with Montgomery Ainsley, father of the groom and owner of Ainsley Properties, Phoenix's biggest competitor. His suspicions had festered long enough. 3 weeks ago, he'd hired Dominic Russo, an ex-cop turned private investigator. Today was the day he'd finally learned the truth. "Mr. Reynolds," Dominic said, climbing out of his car. "Got a minute?" Phoenix led him to his home office, a room that showcased his journey, framed blueprints of his first major project, photos with city officials, the hammer his father had given him when he turned 18. "Just give it to me straight," Phoenix said, settling into his leather chair. Dominic slid a manila envelope across the desk. "Been going on for about 8 months from what I can tell. Weekly meetings at the Meridian Hotel downtown." The photos inside told the story Phoenix had feared but expected. Marilyn entering the hotel, Montgomery holding her hand in the lobby, kissing her in the elevator. The timestamps showed patterns, always on Thursdays, always when Phoenix had his standing meeting with city officials. "There's more," Dominic said. "They've been transferring funds to a shared account. I tracked several large withdrawals coinciding with your daughter's wedding planning." Phoenix stared at the bank statements. "What exactly are they paying for?" "From what I gathered, they're covering wedding costs you weren't consulted on. That last one, $20,000, was for a wedding venue change. The original reservation under your name was canceled." Phoenix's jaw tightened. He hadn't been told about any venue change. "Thank you, Dominic. You'll find your final payment in your account by end of day." After the investigator left, Phoenix sat alone, thumbing through 28 years of memories now tainted. The beginning had been beautiful, Marilyn supporting him through the lean years, celebrating every small victory. Somewhere along the way, as his business grew, they drifted. But this was calculated betrayal. His phone rang, Skylar calling. He considered ignoring it, but decided against it. "Hey, sweetheart," he answered, keeping his voice level. "Dad, I've been trying to reach you. Did you get the new wedding invitation?" "No," he replied honestly. "Really? Mom said she'd handle it. Anyway, there's been a slight change of plans. The ceremony will be at the Ainsley estate now. Isn't that amazing? Montgomery offered it to us when he heard about our venue troubles." Phoenix swallowed his anger. How thoughtful of him. "I know you two have that business rivalry thing, but he's been so helpful with the wedding. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need to talk to you about the ceremony." "What about it?" A pause. "Well, Montgomery's been helping so much, and he and Mom thought, maybe it would be nice if he walked me down the aisle with you. A blended family kind of thing." Phoenix gripped the desk until his knuckles turned white. "That's not happening, Skylar." "Dad, please don't be difficult. It would mean a lot to Mom and I'll talk to your mother." He hung up before she could respond, his mind racing. 28 years of marriage, a daughter he'd raised and loved. And now they wanted him to share the most important moment of his daughter's life with the man who'd been sleeping with his wife? Phoenix dialed Marilyn's number, steeling himself. When she answered, he spoke with cold precision. "We need to talk. Now." Chapter 2. The Confrontation. Marilyn Reynolds entered their home with practiced grace, setting her designer handbag on the marble countertop Phoenix had installed himself years ago. At 48, she maintained the beauty that had first caught his eye, though now enhanced by expensive treatments and a fitness regimen she'd adopted in the past year. "Phoenix," she said, her voice tinged with irritation. "What's so urgent that I had to leave my meeting?" He stood by the fireplace, photos from Dominic's envelope arranged on the coffee table. "Your meeting with Montgomery Ainsley? Strange, I thought that was scheduled for tomorrow." "Thursday, your usual day." Her face registered momentary confusion before hardening. "What are you talking about?" "Sit down, Marilyn." He gestured to the couch. When she hesitated, he added, "Unless you'd rather I call Skylar over to join this conversation." That did it. She sat, glancing at the coffee table, her eyes widening as she recognized the photos. "You've been sleeping with Montgomery Ainsley for 8 months, Phoenix stated flatly. "You've been planning my daughter's wedding with him, changing venues without telling me, and now apparently he's walking her down the aisle." "Our daughter," Marilyn corrected sharply. "And it's not what you think. Please enlighten me." Phoenix crossed his arms, leaning against the mantel. "Montgomery and I. It just happened. You were never home, Phoenix. Always at job sites, always at meetings. Do you know Skylar cried on her 16th birthday because you missed her party for a business emergency?" "That's a convenient rewrite of history," Phoenix said. "I provided everything for this family. I built this house with my own hands. Built this house and forgot about the people in it." Marilyn stood, gaining confidence. "Montgomery sees me. He asks what I want, what I think. When was the last time you did that? So this justifies betraying your husband? Hijacking our daughter's wedding. Skylar loves Montgomery. He's been more present in her wedding planning than you have." Phoenix's laugh was bitter. "Because you deliberately kept me out of the loop. Changed venues without telling me. Scheduled meetings when you knew I couldn't attend." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes flickered away. "I have the receipts, Marilyn. Literally." He pointed to the bank statements. "You and your lover have been systematically pushing me out of my daughter's life." She straightened her shoulders. "Montgomery and I love each other. We're building a future together, one that includes Skylar." "And what about me? The father who raised her? The man who gave you everything. You gave us things, Phoenix. Houses, cars, vacations. But you were never really with us." She moved toward the door, then turned back. "I was going to wait until after the wedding, but I want a divorce. You can have the house. It was always more yours than ours anyway." Phoenix didn't move. "And what does Skylar think about all this?" Marilyn hesitated. "She understands that sometimes people grow apart. Does she understand that her mother's been having an affair with her future father-in-law?" Real fear flashed across Marilyn's face. "You wouldn't." "No, I wouldn't hurt Skylar like that. But I won't be sidelined at my own daughter's wedding." He stepped forward. "If Montgomery walks her down the aisle, I won't be there. You'd miss your only daughter's wedding out of pride? I'd miss it out of self-respect. Tell Skylar I'll give her away as her father, or I won't attend at all." Marilyn shook her head. "You're being unreasonable. I've already spoken with my lawyer. The divorce papers will be ready tomorrow. Consider this the end of our negotiation." Phoenix turned away, signaling the conversation was over. After she left, Phoenix poured himself a whiskey and called the one person he knew he could trust, his sister Beverly. "Phoenix?" she answered immediately. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "You knew?" he said, not a question. "I suspected. That's why I kept calling. She's leaving me for Montgomery Ainsley. They've been planning it for months." Beverly's sigh was heavy. "What are you going to do?" Phoenix stared out the window at the garden Marilyn had designed, at the gazebo where Skylar had played as a child. "I'm going to fight for my place in my daughter's life," he said. "And then I'm going to make them both regret ever crossing me." Chapter 3: The Ultimatum. 2 weeks later, Phoenix sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing the divorce settlement. The division of assets was straightforward. Phoenix would keep his company and their main home. Marilyn would take their vacation properties and her considerable investment portfolio, much of which had been built with Phoenix's earnings. "She's not asking for alimony?" Phoenix questioned his lawyer, Stanford Wilson, a sharp-minded man with 30 years of experience handling high-profile divorces. "No," Stanford confirmed. "But there's something else. She wants full control over Skylar's wedding arrangements." Phoenix scoffed. "Skylar is 25. She doesn't need parental consent." "True, but Marilyn is requesting that the court recognize her as the primary decision-maker for all financial aspects of the wedding. She's claiming you've been deliberately obstructive. That's rich, considering she and Montgomery changed the venue without consulting me." Phoenix drummed his fingers on the conference table. "What's her angle?" Stanford adjusted his glasses. "My guess? It gives her and Montgomery control of the narrative. If you're excluded from the planning, they can shape how Skylar sees your role. And how's that working out for them?" "Quite well, unfortunately." Stanford slid over a formal-looking envelope. "This arrived at my office this morning. It's addressed to you." Phoenix opened it to find a wedding invitation, addressed simply to Mr. Phoenix Reynolds. not father of the bride. Just his name, like any other guest. Inside was a handwritten note from Skylar. Dad, I hope you can support my decisions for MY Day. Montgomery will be walking me down the aisle as a symbol of our families uniting. I'd still like you there, but please understand this is what I want. Love, Skylar. Phoenix felt his blood pressure rise. The handwriting was Skylar's, but the words, the manipulation, reeked of Marilyn and Montgomery. They've poisoned her against me, he said quietly. It's a classic alienation tactic, Stanford agreed. Create a situation where you either accept a diminished role or appear unreasonable for objecting. Phoenix stood and paced the office. I won't be a prop in their performance. What are you going to do? First, I need to talk to Skylar directly, without Marilyn or Montgomery present. Phoenix tried for days to arrange a meeting with his daughter. Text messages went unanswered. Calls went to voicemail. Finally, in desperation, he showed up at her apartment. Skylar answered the door in workout clothes, surprise registering on her face. Dad, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Phoenix said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment he'd helped her buy after college graduation now felt like foreign territory. I'm actually heading out soon, she said, checking her watch. Pre-wedding yoga with Mom and Simone. Simone, Montgomery's daughter from his first marriage. Soon to be Skylar's stepsister. This won't take long, Phoenix insisted. I got the wedding invitation. Skylar's expression hardened in a way that reminded him painfully of Marilyn. And, are you going to make this difficult? I'm trying to understand why my daughter doesn't want her father to walk her down the aisle. It's not that I don't want you there, she countered. I just think having Montgomery do it makes more sense for our families going forward. Our families. Phoenix repeated. Skylar, that man is sleeping with your mother while she's still married to me. Skylar flinched. Mom said you try to turn me against them. They told me everything, Dad. How you've been emotionally absent for years. How you prioritized work over family. They're not the bad guys here. Phoenix felt as if he'd been punched. And you believe them? I've lived it. Remember my high school graduation? You were on a call the entire ceremony. Or my art show in college. You didn't even show up. I was securing the Westbrook contract that paid for this apartment, Phoenix said, gesturing around them. And I missed your art show because there was a collapse at a job site and 2 of my men were in the hospital. There was always some excuse. Skylar grabbed her yoga mat. Mom and Montgomery support each other. They show up. That's the kind of relationship I want modeled at my wedding. Phoenix took a deep breath. Skylar, I won't attend as just another guest. Either I walk you down the aisle as your father, or I won't be there at all. Her eyes widened. You'd miss my wedding over this? I'd miss being used as a prop in a ceremony designed to humiliate me. He moved toward the door. The choice is yours. Let me know what you decide. Outside, he called Beverly. She's completely under their influence, he said as soon as she answered. I've given her an ultimatum. Either I walk her down the aisle, or I won't attend. Risky move, Beverly replied. What if she chooses them? Phoenix watched the skyline of the city he'd helped build, towers he'd constructed glinting in the afternoon sun. Then I'll be on a beach somewhere during the wedding. And when it all falls apart, which it will, they'll know exactly what they've lost. Chapter 4. The Decision. The invitation to the rehearsal dinner arrived with Phoenix's name conspicuously absent. His ultimatum had been answered. Skylar had chosen Montgomery and Marilyn's version of events over her own father. Phoenix sat in his home office, surrounded by the life he'd built, feeling like a stranger in it. The phone on his desk rang. Beverly again. You need to reconsider, she said without preamble. Skylar's wedding is in 3 days. I'm aware, Phoenix replied, his voice devoid of emotion. And my position hasn't changed. Phoenix, this is your daughter. Your only child, who has made it abundantly clear that her mother's boyfriend is more important to her than I am. He pulled up his email, checking flight confirmations. I've booked a trip to Barbados. I leave tomorrow. You're seriously going on vacation during Skylar's wedding? Beverly sounded incredulous. What would you have me do? Sit in the back row and watch Montgomery walk my daughter down the aisle? Smile through the father-daughter dance while I'm relegated to the sidelines? No, thank you. Have you even spoken to Skylar about this? Phoenix's jaw tightened. I've tried. She's blocked my number. Oh, Phoenix. Beverly's voice softened. This is exactly what they want. If you're not there, they win. This isn't about winning, Bev. It's about dignity. Phoenix looked at the photo on his desk, Skylar at age 8, sitting on his shoulders at a construction site, both of them wearing hard hats and wide smiles. Besides, I've arranged something for her. A private account in her name with enough money to start over if she ever needs to. The details will be delivered to her the morning after the wedding. She needs her father, not money. She's made her choice. Now I'm making mine. Phoenix ended the call, refusing to let his sister hear the crack in his voice. The next morning, Phoenix packed lightly. A few casual shirts, shorts, sunglasses. Things for a man with no responsibilities, no family obligations. His phone buzzed continuously, but he ignored the calls from unknown numbers, likely wedding vendors or distant relatives wondering about his absence. As he loaded his suitcase into his SUV, a car pulled into his driveway. Grant Keller, Marilyn's brother, stepped out. "Running away, Reynolds?" Grant called, approaching with the confident swagger of a man who believed he held the moral high ground. "Taking a vacation," Phoenix corrected, closing the trunk. "Something wrong with that? Besides the fact that your daughter's getting married in 2 days?" "Yeah, something's wrong." Grant stopped a few feet away. "Marilyn asked me to talk some sense into you." Phoenix laughed humorlessly. "That's rich. Marilyn wants me at the wedding now. She wants what's best for Skylar. The kid's stressed enough without daddy drama." Interesting perspective from the brother of a woman who's been having an affair with the father of the groom. Phoenix checked his watch. "Look, I appreciate the family intervention, but I have a flight to catch." Grant's expression shifted, something like understanding crossing his features. "For what it's worth, I think you're getting a raw deal here. Marilyn's always been ambitious. That's one word for it. But Skylar's caught in the middle. This isn't her fault." Phoenix sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Tell her I love her. Tell her my door is always open when she's ready to hear the truth." Grant nodded slowly. "I'll tell her. Safe travels, Reynolds." Hours later, Phoenix sat on a chartered yacht off the coast of Barbados, the endless blue of the Caribbean stretching before him. He'd deliberately chosen a remote sailing expedition with spotty cell service. Whatever chaos unfolded at the wedding, he wouldn't be available to fix it. His satellite phone rang, the one number he'd given only to Reed Donovan, his business partner and closest friend. He answered, the connection crackling. "How's paradise?" Reed asked. "Peaceful," Phoenix replied. "What's happening there?" "Chaos, from what I hear. Montgomery's son is having second thoughts. Apparently, he just found out about the affair and isn't thrilled about his dad sleeping with his future mother-in-law." Phoenix felt a twisted satisfaction, but pushed it away. "Not my circus, not my monkeys." "There's more," Reed continued. "Word is Montgomery's been cutting corners on that new luxury condo development to finance this wedding. The city inspector, Wilson's brother-in-law, is taking a closer look after an anonymous tip. Phoenix had nothing to do with that tip, but he couldn't say he was sorry about it. "Anything else?" "Yeah. Skylar's been calling the office looking for you." Sounded upset. Phoenix's heart clenched. "What did you tell her?" "That you were unavailable. Following your instructions." Reed paused. "You sure about this approach?" Phoenix watched the sun setting over the water, thinking of all the sunsets he'd missed while building his empire, all the family moments sacrificed on the altar of success. "No," he admitted. "But it's too late to change course now." Chapter 5, The Collapse. The morning of Skylar's wedding dawned with perfect weather in the northeast, while Phoenix woke to a gentle Caribbean breeze on the chartered yacht. He'd deliberately scheduled a deep-sea fishing expedition for the day, ensuring he'd be unreachable during the ceremony. The captain, a weathered local named Frederick, didn't ask questions about why a man would be alone on such a trip. He simply handed Phoenix a fishing rod and pointed to promising spots on the horizon. "Sometimes the fish that fights hardest is the one worth catching," Frederick commented as Phoenix struggled with his first catch of the day. "And sometimes what looks like giving up is just waiting for the right moment to strike." Phoenix wondered if the man somehow knew his situation or if life on the sea simply bred philosophers. Meanwhile, at the Ainsley estate, the carefully orchestrated wedding was beginning to unravel. Though Phoenix couldn't know it yet, what would later be described to him as 77+ frantic calls were accumulating on his silenced phone. The first crisis hit when the catering company, one that Montgomery had insisted upon using instead of the chef Phoenix had recommended, arrived 2 hours late with half the ordered food. The staff claimed there had been a miscommunication about payment, as the final deposit had never been processed. Marilyn, resplendent in a designer mother-of-the-bride dress, frantically called Phoenix's lawyer, assuming he was somehow blocking the funds. Stanford truthfully informed her that Phoenix had placed the full catering payment in escrow months ago, but Montgomery had redirected it. As guests began arriving, the second disaster struck. The string quartet Montgomery had hired to replace Phoenix's original band choice failed to appear. Their apologetic manager explained they'd received a better offer from another wedding, one that had actually paid their deposit. By noon, Skylar sat in the bridal suite, still in her robe, mascara streaking down her face while her bridesmaids tried to comfort her. "Where's Dad?" she kept asking. "He would know how to fix this." Marilyn, increasingly frantic, had been calling Phoenix's number every 5 minutes, each call going straight to voicemail. She'd also called his office, his home, his sister, and anyone else who might know his whereabouts. "He's abandoned us," she told Skylar, stroking her hair. "Just like he always does when things get difficult." But Skylar wasn't finding comfort in her mother's words anymore. Dad always handled the business side of things. He wouldn't have let this happen. The third and most devastating blow came an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Drew Mercer, the groom and Montgomery's son, requested a private conversation with Skylar. In the estate's library, surrounded by Montgomery's collected first editions that he often bragged about but never read, Drew confessed his doubts. "I can't do this," he said, unable to meet Skylar's eyes. "Not like this." "What are you talking about?" Skylar asked, her world crumbling further. "I just found out about our parents last week. Dad made it sound like they got together after your parents separated, but then I overheard him on the phone." Drew ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. "They've been planning this for almost a year, Skylar. The merger of our family companies, the strategic alliance, it was all orchestrated. Even our meeting at that charity gala wasn't a coincidence." Skylar felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. "What are you saying?" "My dad pushed me toward you because of what your father built. Your company's lands adjoining our developments, your contracts with the city. It was never about love. It was about acquisition." The revelation hit Skylar like a physical blow. "Did you know? Was our relationship part of this plan?" Drew finally looked at her, his eyes showing genuine pain. "No. What I feel for you is real. But I can't start our life together with this hanging over us. I can't be part of my father's schemes anymore." Outside the library door, Montgomery was arguing loudly with the wedding planner about rearranging the seating chart now that several key guests, business associates of Phoenix who had declined upon learning he wouldn't attend, had canceled. "Fix it," Montgomery shouted. "I'm paying you enough to make this perfect." The wedding planner, a young woman who had been Skylar's friend in college, quit on the spot, throwing her clipboard at Montgomery's feet. As the carefully constructed facade crumbled, Skylar made a desperate call to the one person who had always fixed things, her father. Her call joined dozens of others in the void of his silenced phone. By evening, what should have been a reception was instead a somber gathering of confused guests picking at hastily ordered pizza. The wedding had been postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. Montgomery was nowhere to be found, having retreated to his study with a bottle of scotch. Marilyn sat alone at what would have been the head table, repeatedly checking her phone. And Phoenix, unaware of the chaos, watched the sunset from the deck of his chartered yacht, wondering if his absence had made any impact at all or if the wedding had proceeded smoothly without him. "More calls coming in for you," Frederick noted, pointing to the satellite phone Phoenix had left in the cabin. "Must be something important." "It can wait until tomorrow," Phoenix replied, casting his line into the darkening water. "Today is about getting away." "Running away and getting away ain't the same thing," Frederick observed, his weathered face thoughtful. "One's about fear, the other's about peace." Phoenix considered this as he felt a strong pull on his line. "And how do you tell the difference?" Frederick smiled. "When you're running, you're always looking back. When you're just getting away, you enjoy the view ahead." Phoenix realized he'd been checking the time all day, calculating what would be happening at the wedding. He hadn't been present in his escape at all. "Maybe it's time I answered those calls," he admitted. "Tide's turning anyway," Frederick agreed. "Fish won't be biting much longer." As the yacht turned back toward shore and stronger cell reception, Phoenix prepared himself for whatever storm awaited him. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. Phoenix's phone exploded with notifications as the yacht approached the marina. 77 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, and a flood of text messages, all from the past 18 hours. Most were from Marilyn and Skylar, but there were also calls from Beverly, Grant, Reed, and even Montgomery. Phoenix sat on the deck, scrolling through the texts, piecing together the wedding disaster from fragments. Dad, where are you? Everything's falling apart. Skylar, 11:42 a.m. This is your fault somehow, I know it. Call me immediately. Marilyn, 12:15 p.m. Reynolds, we need to talk. Man to man. Montgomery, 1:30 p.m. Drew backed out. Wedding's off. I need you, Daddy. Skylar, 3:22 p.m. The last message from his daughter struck him like a physical blow. She hadn't called him Daddy since she was 12. Whatever had happened must have shattered her world completely. He called Beverly first, needing his sister's unfiltered perspective before contacting Skylar. Thank God, Beverly answered immediately. Are you still in Barbados? For now, Phoenix replied. What happened, Bev? Total disaster. The wedding fell apart at every seam. Food issues, vendor problems, and then the groom got cold feet after finding out about Marilyn and Montgomery's affair. Phoenix absorbed this. How's Skylar? Devastated, humiliated, and finally seeing the truth. Beverly paused. She needs you, Phoenix. Not to gloat or say, I told you so, but just to be her dad. I'll book the first flight home, he promised. There's more you should know, Beverly continued. After everything collapsed, Marilyn had a complete meltdown. Started blaming everyone. You, the wedding planner, even Skylar for not being understanding enough about her relationship with Montgomery. Phoenix felt cold anger wash over him. Where's Skylar now? At my place. She didn't want to go home with Marilyn or stay at her apartment alone. Tell her I'm coming home. And Bev, thank you for being there for her. Phoenix's return flight was spent in contemplative silence. He was relieved the wedding hadn't happened, not because it ruined Marilyn and Montgomery's plans, but because Skylar had been saved from what was clearly a manipulated relationship. Yet he felt no triumph. His daughter was hurting, and regardless of how they'd arrived at this point, her pain was real. When Phoenix arrived at Beverly's house the next evening, he found Skylar curled up on the couch in sweatpants and one of his old construction company sweatshirts she'd borrowed years ago. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dad, she said simply, rising to her feet. Phoenix crossed the room and wrapped her in his arms, holding her as she broke down again. I'm so sorry, she sobbed against his chest. You were right about everything, and I wouldn't listen. Shoo, he soothed, stroking her hair. None of that matters now. Drew told me everything, she continued through tears. How Montgomery pursued Mom to get to your company. How they orchestrated our relationship. It was all fake, Dad. Even the way I felt about you was manipulated. Mom and Montgomery kept telling me stories about how you'd neglected us, how you'd chosen work over family. Phoenix guided her back to the couch, sitting beside her. Some of that was true, he admitted. I did work too much. I missed things I shouldn't have. But I never stopped loving you, Skylar. Everything I built was for you. Beverly brought them tea and quietly left the room, giving father and daughter privacy. I don't know what to do now, Skylar confessed. I feel so stupid. Everyone saw it, but me. You saw what you wanted to see. A mother who supported you. A future that seemed perfect. Phoenix took her hand. We all have blind spots when it comes to the people we love. Skylar looked up at him, her eyes vulnerable but clearer than they'd been in months. How do you forgive yourself for being so wrong about someone? Phoenix thought about Marilyn, about 28 years of marriage ending in betrayal. You acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and move forward wiser. Did you know this would happen? Is that why you went to Barbados? I knew something wasn't right, Phoenix answered honestly. But I went away because I couldn't bear to watch from the sidelines. That was my mistake. Skylar squeezed his hand. Will you help me fix this mess? The venue deposits, the vendors, there must be thousands of dollars tied up in all of it. Don't worry about any of that, Phoenix assured her. We'll sort it out together. As they talked into the night, Phoenix realized that despite the pain, a door had opened. His relationship with his daughter, which had been systematically dismantled by Marilyn and Montgomery, now had a chance to heal. But as he listened to more details of their manipulation, how they'd intercepted his messages, rewritten the narrative of his involvement in Skylar's life, and isolated her from people who might have told her the truth, Phoenix's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about a ruined wedding or a cheating wife. This was a calculated attempt to destroy everything he valued. And for that, there would be consequences. Chapter 7. The Strategy. 1 week after the wedding disaster, Phoenix sat across from Stanford Wilson in his law office, reviewing documents spread across the mahogany table. The divorce is straightforward now, Stanford explained. Marilyn's infidelity and the evidence of conspiracy against you shifts things significantly in your favor. Phoenix nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. That's not why you're here, though, is it? Stanford asked perceptively. No. Phoenix leaned forward. I want to know exactly how far Montgomery Ainsley went to get to my company. I need a complete investigation, business records, financial transactions, communications with Marilyn. Everything. Stanford removed his glasses. Phoenix, you have grounds for a highly favorable divorce settlement. Skylar's back in your life. Why not just move on? Because they didn't just try to take my family, Phoenix replied, his voice cold. They tried to take everything I built. I need to know how deep this goes. Stanford sighed but nodded. I'll put my best people on it. But Phoenix, be careful. Revenge is rarely as satisfying as people imagine. This isn't about revenge, Phoenix insisted. It's about justice. Later that day, Phoenix met with Reed at their office overlooking the city skyline. The Reynolds construction headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a building Phoenix had developed 10 years earlier. How bad is it? Phoenix asked without preamble. Reed pulled up financial projections on his tablet. The Westbrook development is still solid, but we've lost 2 smaller contracts that were tied to Ainsley properties. They pulled out the day after the wedding fiasco. As expected, Phoenix noted. What about the Hamilton Street project? That's where it gets interesting. Reed brought up schematics of a downtown revitalization project. Ainsley's been underbidding us on every phase, but there's no way they can deliver at the prices they're quoting. Their margins would be non-existent. Unless they're cutting corners, Phoenix suggested. Remember the Parkview Towers? Reed nodded grimly. Montgomery's first major development. 3 years after completion, they found structural issues that cost millions to fix. He blamed the subcontractors. Have Wyatt Dalton look into their supply chain, Phoenix instructed. I want to know if they're using substandard materials again. As Reed made notes, Phoenix's phone rang. Marilyn calling for the first time since the wedding debacle. Phoenix, she began when he answered, her voice carefully controlled. We need to talk about the house. What about it? He asked neutrally. I need to collect some personal items. Montgomery's place is being renovated, and we're staying at a hotel in the meantime. Phoenix almost laughed. Money troubles already? Don't be petty, she snapped. This situation is difficult enough. I'll have Stanford arrange a time for you to collect your things. With supervision, of course. Supervision? I lived in that house for 20 years. And now you don't, Phoenix replied simply. Is there anything else? A pause. Skylar isn't returning my calls. That's between you and our daughter. You've turned her against me, Marilyn accused. No, Marilyn. You did that all by yourself. Phoenix ended the call, turning back to Reed. Where were we? Over the next 2 weeks, Phoenix methodically gathered information. Wyatt Dalton's investigation revealed alarming details. Montgomery had indeed been using substandard materials on his current projects, and worse, had been falsifying inspection reports through a connection at the city planning office. Phoenix also discovered that Montgomery's financial situation was far more precarious than anyone realized. The lavish lifestyle, the expensive wedding preparations, all financed through increasingly desperate measures as his company struggled. Most disturbingly, Phoenix uncovered evidence that Montgomery had been systematically targeting his clients, using information Marilyn had gleaned during their marriage to undercut Reynolds Construction's bids and relationships. But the final piece fell into place when Simone Mercer, Montgomery's ex-wife, reached out through Stanford. They met at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town, where Simone, an elegant woman in her 50s, arrived with a leather portfolio. I've been waiting for someone to finally see through Montgomery's facade, she said, sliding the portfolio across the table. These are copies of documents I've kept since our divorce 15 years ago. Pattern of behavior evidence, if you will. Inside, Phoenix found financial records, emails, and legal documents showing how Montgomery had orchestrated similar situations with other business rivals, getting close to their families, creating personal entanglements that gave him access to proprietary information. He did the same thing to Harold Thompson before he bankrupted Thompson Development, Simone explained. Became best friends with Harold, vacationed with his family, all while systematically dismantling his company from the inside. Why are you showing me this now? Phoenix asked. Simone's smile was tight. Because Montgomery tried to reduce my alimony payments last month, claiming financial hardship. After 15 years of paying for his betrayal, he wants to cut me off when I need surgery. She leaned forward. And because he hurt your daughter. Drew told me everything. How his father pushed him toward Skylar for business reasons. That crosses a line even Montgomery shouldn't have crossed. Phoenix studied the documents. These are exactly what I needed. Thank you. Just promise me one thing, Simone said as they parted. When you take him down, and I know you will, make it count. Armed with this information, Phoenix called a meeting with his closest allies, Reed, Beverly, Stanford, and Wyatt. In his home office, he laid out what he'd discovered and his plan for response. This isn't just about my personal grievances, Phoenix explained. Montgomery Ainsley is cutting corners that could put people's lives at risk. He's corrupting city officials. He's manipulating families for financial gain. It ends now. What exactly are you proposing? Stanford asked cautiously. Phoenix outlined his strategy, a three-pronged approach that would expose Montgomery's business practices to regulatory authorities, reveal his financial misdeeds to investors, and make public his pattern of personal manipulations. This could get ugly, Beverly warned. Are you prepared for the fallout? What about Skylar? Skylar knows everything, Phoenix assured them. She's the one who suggested I talk to Simone in the first place. Reed, normally the most cautious of Phoenix's advisors, nodded slowly. He came after everything you built. He tried to use your daughter as a pawn. If anyone deserves consequences, it's Montgomery Ainsley. Phoenix looked around at the people who had stood by him, who had seen his pain and supported him through the betrayal. Then we move tomorrow, he decided. And God help them both. Chapter 8. The Execution. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning when the city's building inspector, acting on an anonymous tip, arrived at Montgomery's flagship development project, Ainsley Heights, a luxury condominium complex near completion. Phoenix, watching from his car across the street, observed the inspector's growing concern as he examined support beams that should have been steel but were instead aluminum with steel coating, a dangerous substitution in a 12-story building. By noon, construction was halted. By 2 o'clock, news vans arrived as workers were sent home. By 4, Montgomery himself appeared, gesticulating wildly at city officials who stood firm with clipboards and stern expressions. Phase 1 complete. The second domino fell that evening, when financial documents detailing Montgomery's precarious business position were accidentally emailed to his major investors, the local business journal, and the state banking commission. The documents, all legitimate but obtained through Simone's resources, showed a pattern of moving funds between projects to cover shortfalls, misleading investors about progress, and grossly overstating projected returns. Phoenix didn't need to be present for this phase. The panicked calls from investors would be hitting Montgomery's phone right about now, even as he dealt with the construction crisis. Phase 2 complete. The third domino, the most personal, was scheduled for the following day. This one Phoenix would deliver personally. He arrived at the Metropolitan Club at precisely 12:30 p.m., when Montgomery typically took lunch in the private dining room reserved for the city's business elite. Phoenix had been a member longer than Montgomery, but had rarely used the facility, preferring simpler establishments closer to his job sites. Today, however, called for a different approach. Montgomery sat alone at his usual table, his face haggard from the previous day's disasters. When he spotted Phoenix entering the dining room, his expression darkened with recognition and fury. "You," he growled as Phoenix approached. "You're behind all this." Phoenix took the seat opposite him without invitation. Behind what exactly? Building inspectors doing their jobs? Financial transparency? Please, enlighten me. Don't play innocent. You've been sabotaging me since the wedding fell apart. Phoenix signaled a waiter for coffee, his demeanor calm. Interesting theory. Similar to how you've been sabotaging me for the past year while sleeping with my wife. Montgomery's eyes darted around the room, aware of other diners who might overhear. That's different. Marilyn and I have genuine feelings for each other. I'm sure you do, Phoenix agreed easily. Just like you had genuine feelings for Harold Thompson's wife before you bankrupted him, or Richard Miller's daughter before you took over his company. Montgomery's face went pale. What are you talking about? Phoenix slid a folder across the table. Simone sends her regards. She kept quite the detailed records of your previous business strategies. Opening the folder with trembling hands, Montgomery saw copies of emails, photographs, and financial records documenting his pattern of personal manipulation for business gain. These are private communications, he whispered. Yes, Phoenix agreed. And in about 30 minutes, they won't be. Unless we reach an understanding. Montgomery's eyes narrowed. What do you want? First, you'll resign from the Hamilton Street Revitalization Project, recommending Reynolds Construction as your replacement. That's my biggest contract. Phoenix corrected. Second, you'll confess to the building inspector that you personally authorized the substandard materials at Ainsley Heights, clearing your project manager of any wrongdoing. That would destroy me professionally, Montgomery protested. Better professionally than personally, Phoenix countered, tapping the folder. Third, you'll sign over your shares in the Bristol development to Simone as compensation for the alimony you tried to withhold. Montgomery's face flushed with anger. You've got some nerve. And finally, Phoenix continued as if there had been no interruption. You'll end all communication with Marilyn and Skylar. Permanently. You can't dictate who I can. I'm not finished, Phoenix cut him off again. You orchestrated a relationship between your son and my daughter to gain access to my company. You manipulated a young woman's feelings as a business tactic. That's where you crossed the line that can't be uncrossed. For the first time, Montgomery looked ashamed. Drew and Skylar's relationship wasn't entirely my doing. They did have genuine. Save it, Phoenix interrupted. My lawyer has prepared the necessary documents. He nodded toward Stanford, who had been waiting at the bar and now approached with a leather portfolio. You have 10 minutes to sign, or at 1 o'clock, these records go public. Montgomery stared at the documents Stanford placed before him, then at Phoenix. You've thought of everything, haven't you? No, Phoenix replied honestly. I never thought you'd target my family. I never thought Marilyn would betray 28 years of marriage. I never thought my daughter would be collateral damage in your schemes. But I've certainly thought about what happens next. With a shaking hand, Montgomery signed the papers. This feels like blackmail, he muttered. It's accountability, Phoenix corrected, standing to leave. Something you've avoided for far too long. As Phoenix walked away, Montgomery called after him. What about Marilyn? Didn't she get a say in any of this? Phoenix turned back with a cold smile. Don't worry about Marilyn. She's handled separately. Indeed, at that very moment across town, Marilyn was being escorted from Phoenix's house by security personnel, her hastily packed belongings loaded into a waiting car. The locks had been changed, the security codes altered, and her access to joint accounts terminated. Additionally, thanks to the evidence Simone had provided, Stanford had amended the divorce filing to include fraud and conspiracy charges that would significantly impact Marilyn's settlement. By evening, all 3 phases of Phoenix's plan had been executed. Montgomery's business was in freefall, his reputation shattered. Marilyn had been cut off from the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. And Phoenix had reclaimed what was rightfully his company's standing, his home, and most importantly, his relationship with his daughter. But as he sat alone in his study that night, Phoenix felt no triumph. Only a hollow sense that justice, while necessary, was a poor substitute for what he'd truly lost, the family he'd thought he had. Chapter 9. The Reconstruction. 6 months after what the local business papers had termed the Ainsley collapse, Phoenix stood on the roof of the newly renamed Reynolds Tower, formerly Ainsley Heights, surveying the city he'd helped build. The spring air carried the promise of new beginnings, a fitting atmosphere for the building's grand reopening under his company's management. After Montgomery's disgrace, the city had awarded Reynolds Construction the contract to complete and certify the luxury condominium project. Phoenix had personally overseen the replacement of all substandard materials, turning a potential disaster into a showcase of proper construction practices. Looks good from up here, said a voice behind him. Skylar, elegant in a business suit, joined her father at the rooftop edge. Thanks for coming, Phoenix replied, putting an arm around her shoulders. Means a lot to have you here today. Skylar had spent the past months rebuilding her life with the same determination her father applied to his projects. She'd returned to her original passion for architecture, something Montgomery and Marilyn had discouraged in favor of more suitable interests, and had recently joined Reynolds Construction as a junior designer. "I wouldn't miss it," she assured him. "This is your vindication." Phoenix shook his head. "Not vindication. Correction. We're fixing something that was built wrong from the start." The rooftop reception would begin soon, with city officials, investors, and media all gathering to celebrate the tower's completion. But first, Phoenix had a more private matter to address. "Have you heard from your mother?" he asked carefully. Skylar's expression tightened. "She calls occasionally, always when she needs something." After the divorce was finalized, Marilyn had moved to a smaller city 3 hours away, where her considerably reduced circumstances were less conspicuous. Without Montgomery's financial support, he'd been forced to liquidate assets to cover lawsuits from investors. She'd had to adapt to a middle-class lifestyle that she found deeply challenging. "And how do you feel about that?" Phoenix asked. "Sad, mostly," Skylar admitted. "She still doesn't take responsibility for what happened. In her version, you're the villain who destroyed her happiness out of spite." Phoenix had expected no less. Marilyn had always excelled at reshaping narratives to cast herself as the victim. And Montgomery? He still found it difficult to say the name without tension. "Disappeared, from what I hear. Drew mentioned he's trying to rebuild in Florida under a different company name." Phoenix nodded, unsurprised. Men like Montgomery always found new territory to exploit. "And how are things with Drew?" Phoenix kept his tone neutral. The young man had reached out to Skylar a few months after the wedding disaster, offering sincere apologies and explanations. Skylar smiled slightly. "We're meeting for coffee next week. Just as friends. He's working for a nonprofit now, completely cut ties with his father's business." "Good for him," Phoenix said, meaning it. Drew had been as much a pawn in Montgomery's schemes as Skylar had been. The rooftop door opened, and Reed appeared. "They're ready for you downstairs, Phoenix. Press is all set up in the main lobby." Phoenix squared his shoulders. Time to face the music. The grand lobby of Reynolds Tower gleamed with marble and brushed steel, packed with journalists, business associates, and city officials. As Phoenix took the podium, he spotted Beverly in the crowd, giving him an encouraging nod. "Thank you all for coming today," Phoenix began. "Reynolds Tower represents more than just a building to me. It symbolizes the importance of doing things right the first time, of building on solid foundations, and of correcting course when necessary." His speech was brief but impactful, focusing on the future rather than dwelling on the controversies of the past. As applause filled the lobby, Phoenix felt a sense of closure washing over him. The reception that followed was lively, with Phoenix moving through the crowd, shaking hands, and accepting congratulations. In a quiet moment near the champagne table, Beverly joined him. "Quite the turnout," she observed, "especially considering most of these people were at Montgomery's site a year ago." Phoenix smiled wryly. "The business world is fickle that way." "Speaking of fickle, I saw who just arrived." Beverly nodded toward the entrance, where Marilyn stood hesitantly, looking both out of place and determined. Phoenix's jaw tightened. "What is she doing here?" "My guess? Looking for reconciliation now that her other options have dried up." Indeed, as Marilyn spotted Phoenix, she began making her way toward him, her practiced smile firmly in place. "I've got this," Phoenix assured his sister, stepping forward to intercept his ex-wife before she could reach the center of the gathering. "Marilyn," he greeted her coolly. "This is a surprise." "Phoenix," she replied, her voice honeyed. "The building looks wonderful. I always knew you'd do amazing things with it." "Did you?" Phoenix kept his tone neutral. "What brings you here today?" Marilyn glanced around at the successful gathering. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about what happened. I think we both made mistakes." "Is that right?" Phoenix raised an eyebrow. "We were together for almost 30 years, she continued. "That kind of history doesn't just disappear. I thought perhaps we could talk privately. About the future." Phoenix studied the woman he'd once loved beyond reason, seeing clearly now the calculation behind her smile, the desperation in her eyes. 6 months ago, her arrival might have sparked anger. Now he felt only a distant pity. "There is no us future, Marilyn," he said quietly. "You made your choice. I've made mine." Her smile faltered. "People change, Phoenix. They realize their mistakes." "Yes, they do." Phoenix nodded toward where Skylar stood across the room, watching their interaction with concern. And I've realized that some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Now if you'll excuse me, my daughter and I have a building to celebrate." He turned away without waiting for her response, feeling lighter with each step. As he rejoined Skylar, she searched his face. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I saw Mom." "I'm better than okay," Phoenix assured her, surprised to find it was true. "Some people come into your life to stay. Others come to teach you what you don't want. Your mother taught me that I deserve loyalty, honesty, and genuine love." Skylar squeezed his arm. "Speaking of which, isn't that Diane from the Architectural Review Board? The one who asked you to dinner last month?" Phoenix followed her gaze to where an attractive woman in her late 40s was examining the building plans displayed near the model. "It might be. You should say hello," Skylar encouraged with a smile. "The past is finished. The foundation's been repaired. Time to start building something new." Phoenix considered this as he looked around the lobby of his reclaimed tower. In every direction stood evidence of his ability to transform disaster into success, to rebuild stronger after betrayal, to create beauty from ruins. "You know what?" he said to Skylar. "I think you're right." As Phoenix moved through the crowd toward Diane, he felt the last weight of resentment fall away. The wedding that collapsed, the marriage that failed, the betrayal that stung, all were now just steps that had led him here, to this moment of new beginnings. He had discovered the true cost of betrayal. But more importantly, he had discovered his own capacity to rise above it, not through forgiveness, but through the simple act of building something better in its place. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.